Here's an interesting article from Zero Hedge. Yeah. A quarter of American adults cannot pay all of their monthly bills, and 44% have less than $400 in cash. So remember the number about 500 in cash? Seems like that's creeping down now, isn't it? There was some good news and some not so good news in the Fed's latest annual report on the economic well-being of U.S. households. First, the good news. The report based on the board's fourth annual survey of household economics and decision-making conducted in October 2016 represents a picture of improving financial well-being among Americans, at least according to the report. Read on to see if this is merited. Overall, 70% of the more than 6,600 respondents said they were either living comfortably or doing okay, up from 1% in 2015, and up 8% from the first survey results in 2013. Not surprisingly, the highest percentage, or 92% of those who responded they were living comfortably, was among the group with more than $100,000 in family income. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? For Americans making less than $40,000, the breakdown was almost evenly split, with 49% saying they are just getting by. According to the same study, 28% of respondents said that their income in the last 12 months was less than $25,000. 28%, wow. Less than $25K, and 40% report that their income was less than the key $40,000 cutoff, which suggests that roughly 4 in 10 Americans are finding it difficult to get by. The improvements in well-being, as reported by the survey respondents, were concentrated among high-income adults with at least some college education, and prompted the Wall Street Journal to write that U.S. household financial health improved in recent years. Even so, most of the changes reported in the survey were relatively modest, reflecting a slowly improving economy and unemployment level at or below 5% throughout 2016. So let me ask you a question first. You know how we polled 1,000 people today and oversampled Democrats, 60% to the Republicans, 40%. And the looks like the Democratic candidate's going to win by about 52%. Hold on. You've only asked 1,000 people out of 3.5 or 350, 60 million people in this country? You polled 1,000? And we know who you polled because, again, you say we oversample Democrats versus Republicans, which means you know specifically who you're reaching out to, which means you're waiting for a specific answer, clearly. And then you report it to us as if it's some kind of real news, like it's a real legitimate test. So my question, again, is I wonder how many of these people they knew were making over $100K a year and decided, let's make sure we get a bunch of them in this 6,600 people survey so we can make the numbers look better than they actually are. Just going to throw that out there as a possibility. So now the not so good news. Nearly 8 years into an economic recovery, nearly half of Americans didn't have enough cash available to cover a $400 emergency. Specifically, the survey found that in line with what the Fed had disclosed in previous years, 44% of respondents said they wouldn't be able to cover an unexpected $400 expense like a car repair or medical bill, or would have to borrow money or sell something to meet it. Troubling as this statistic remains, the overall share of adults who would struggle to come up with $400 in a pinch has declined by 2% from the last survey conducted in 2015 and down to 6% since 2013. Of the group that could not pay in cash, 45% said they would go further into debt and use a credit card to pay off the expense over time, while a quarter would borrow from friends or family, and another 27% just could not pay the expense one way or the other. Others would turn to selling items or using a payday loan. So let me tell you, in case you didn't know, about payday loans and using a credit card to pay off something like that. If you need a credit card to pay off $400, and the credit card's 22, 23, 24, 25, 20, 6, 7%. How How long of a period of time do you think it's going to take them to pay down that $400 credit card? Months upon months upon months upon months. And by the time they're done paying it, again, it could, in all honesty, it could be over a year, 2 years. Who knows? You never know how strapped somebody is, right? Do you know how much that interest would have been adding up all that time and how much they would have paid? Oh my goodness. It would have been incredible. You know, $400 turns into $600, $700, $800, $1,000. Like that, easily. When you barely pay the thing off. Of the group that could not pay in cash, 45% of them said they would go further in debt. Oh, wait a minute. Did I already say that? Yes, I did. Others would turn to selling items or using a payday loan. Again, payday loan, look at the same thing as a damn credit card. The breakdown was largely by education attainment. 79% of those with at least a bachelor's degree said they would still be able to pay all of their bills in full if hit with a $400 charge. Just 52% of those with no more than a high school diploma said the same. Now that's interesting. That's very interesting, is it not? So you're telling me the bachelor's degree, we'd be able to handle a $400 out of nowhere, left field expense, yeah. And 52% who have no more than a high school diploma also said the same. Yeah, I can cover that. Wow. Now, okay, of course, you might say, yeah, but the bachelors, they may be able to afford a $1,000, $2,000 unforeseen expense. Could the high school people do that? And again, we don't know. But we do know your college education just ain't going far enough these days. Okay, we already know that. Just as concerning were other findings from the study. Just under 1/4 of adults, or approximately 23%, are not able to pay all of their current month bills in full, while 25% reported skipping medical treatments due to cost in the prior year. Additionally, 28% of adults who haven't retired yet reported to being grossly unprepared, indicating they had no retirement savings or pension whatsoever. The median out-of-pocket cost for an unexpected major medical expense was about $1,000, and 42% of those with such an expense in the past year either had debt relating to that expense or unpaid balances. The Fed reported that 24 million adults are in debt from medical expenses incurred over the previous year. That's quite a bit, if you ask me. As a result, many respondents went without some type of care, dental care in particular, because they could not afford it, though the 25% who reported such a situation was down from 27% in 2015. Commenting on the report's concerning findings, Fed Governor and Hillary Clinton supporter Lael Brainard said that the survey findings remind us that many American households are struggling financially, including fully 40% of those with a high school diploma or less. More broadly, 44% of the respondents could not cover an unexpected $400 emergency expense, or would rely on borrowing or selling something to do so. The survey also shows that many adults have no savings for retirement. End quote. And guess what, Mr. Fed person? It's all y'all's fault. It's the Federal Reserve's fault. It's always been the Federal Reserve's fault. Fractional reserve lending, borrowing money into existence that can never be paid back because there's interest always attached to the money that came out, but you don't print the interest and just give that to us to pay back. We got to borrow more money essentially to get enough to pay the first payment back. But now we got a second payment too, so to speak. Second amount of interest we have to deal with. So, I don't know if you can hear that. Just install some new filters, our reverse osmosis system. It's been about almost a year and a half, and they say change them out between 6 and 8 months sometimes, but I've seen how you have good water pressure. I'm gonna let that sucker go as long as I can. I don't want to spend $100 on filters if I don't need to, but I just put them in there and that thing was gargling like crazy. I don't know if you heard that. Anyways, the findings also underscore themes apparent during the presidential election, namely the growing gap between the elite and the broader population of whites with a bachelor's degree or more. 85% said they're doing okay or living comfortably, compared with 62% for whites, whites with a high school diploma or less. Blacks and Hispanics have similar but narrower gaps in response to the question, when sorted by education. The biggest differentiator appears to be education. The Fed reported that 82% of adults with a bachelor's degree or more in education said last year they were living comfortably or doing okay, up from 80% the year before, so 82 instead of 80% the year before, as well as 69% of those with some college or an associate degree, up from 66%. Furthermore, 79% of those with at least a bachelor's degree said they would still be able to pay all their other bills in full if hit with a $400 charge. Just 52% of those with no more than a high school diploma said the same. Americans' sense of economic health also varied among racial and ethnic groups. Of the respondents with no more than a high school diploma, a greater portion of non-Hispanic whites, 20.5%, 20.5%, reported being worse off than a year before than did non-Hispanic blacks at 18.6% or Hispanics at 20.2%. Asked to comment by the Wall Street Journal on the latest annual study, Jonathan Murdoch of a New York University professor of public policy and an economist, of course, said that everybody on the low end feels like they're in a different situation, almost like they're in a different America than those with a bachelor's degree or more. He added that the combination of instability and illiquidity are really hurting at the low end, he added. That's the same end that had such an outsized impact on the latest presidential election. So based on the latest set of Fed results, the solution to America's wealth problem would be to force every American into a college education. Not only that, you're going to have a bachelor's degree. 2 year ain't going to cut it, right? And what about the extra debt? Don't worry about it. You'll pay it off the rest of your life. Don't sweat it. But you'll live a little easier. You'll live a little easier, not have to struggle as much. Or will you if you have that huge debt to pay off? Again, what specific people did they make these, this survey or whatever, where the hell this went out? Because the government knows who everybody is, what their salaries are, what everything is. And they can say, well, we surveyed a bunch of people with who had bachelor's degrees. Randomly, just random. When in reality, they chose doctors, lawyers, dentists, you know what I mean? It said, oh, here's your bachelor's degree, people. Here you go. Which, I guess, certain doctors, you got to go higher than a bachelor's. But I guess my point was simply very high earning bachelor's degree type jobs, jobs that pay very well for someone that has a bachelor's degree, not just anybody with a bachelor's degree, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. So, what does he say? So based off the latest Fed results presented above, the solution to America's wealth problem would be to force every American into a college education. Well, sure, just make sure it's debt-free. Because as even the New York Fed's Bill Dudley admitted in early April, student debt and default are a headwind to economic activity, noting that rising student loan debt in the U.S. could ultimately hurt overall home ownership and consumer spending and erode colleges and universities' ability to elevate lower-income students. Well, then why am I hearing all of a sudden they want the housing agent, the whole mortgage industry, we want millennials to get a house now. They're saying we want millennials to be able to go in and get a house now. Let's make it easier. Let's make the down payment smaller now so a millennial can get into housing. Well, wait a minute. A lot of millennials have college. They just got out of college. And the time's ticking. They got to start making that payment. And you want them to go buy a nice new all-time high bubble again house? Well, we'll make it easy for them. We'll just make them pay hardly anything to get down. Maybe no down payment. Just get them into a freaking house. We got a glut of houses. Get them in there. So they can default and get foreclosed on. And ruin their life, or at least their credit for a while. Maybe, unless your plan is to make them bankrupt, because that'll certainly easily make them be able to go bankrupt. Now, of course, they can't bankrupt out of that student loan debt. And that's amazing to me. Is that not amazing to you? That you have these bankruptcy laws in our country that are great. They're there for a reason. Anybody can use it unless you got a student loan. You don't get to use that feature. You are stuck to that for the rest of your life. Why would it only be student loan debt? Why couldn't you do that to something else? But for whatever reason, that's what they chose. And by chance, it's one of the most expensive debts out there at $1.4 trillion now, I believe. There are potential longer-term negative implications of student debt on homeownership and other types of consumer spending, Dud Lee said. Continued increases in college costs and debt burdens could inhibit higher education's ability to serve as an important engine of upward income mobility, and these developments are important and deserve increased attention. Okay, yeah, so Jason Ford's paying attention. He's doing videos on it. Is that enough? Is that going to change things? Oh, no, we got college administrators and the president, and they've been taking credit card. We didn't know they were taking the credit card, and they were buying lavish things for themselves and their administration, and they're going on vacations, and we just found this out. And Right. Which is understandable with a record $1.44 trillion in student loans outstanding as of March 31st, surpassing even the $1.1 trillion in U.S. auto loans. Here are the disturbing findings from the latest New York Fed study on America's student debt crisis. Our analysis shows that for any given level of educational attainment, those with student debt are less likely to own a home in their early 30s than those who completed their education without taking on as much or any debt. So someone who took on way less debt or none at all by going to school, in other words, not going to school, could afford a house in their 30s, whereas someone who did go to school can't? What are you trying to tell me? Or, yes, who completed their education with, okay, so that was the key. That was the key. Let me start that one over. Our analysis shows that for any given level of educational attainment, those with student debt are less likely to own a home in their early 30s than those who completed their education without taking on as much or any debt. So in other words, they still went to school, but they either had a little nest egg they used to help pay that debt down and got out of it quick, or simply mom and dad or however, they already had it paid off. So they were able to get out in the 30s, get my job, don't have to pay back this freaking student loan debt. I'm good. I can go get a house now. Okay, got it. So for anyone else, sorry about your luck. So the $1.44 trillion in debt, that's everybody else. And that number speaks as if there's a lot of somebody else's who didn't have that nice ability to just have their college paid for whatever reason. So, to the extent that the statistical associations we uncovered reflect a casual impact of debt on home ownership, they have important implications for the housing market and future spending behavior. Home ownership represents an important means of wealth accumulation, with housing equity being the principal form of wealth for most households. So changes in the way we finance higher education with an increased reliance on student debt may have important implications for the housing market and the distribution of wealth. Interesting statement. It only took the Fed about 6 years to figure out what was patently obvious to everyone else. Alas, that does not help solve the core underlying problems discussed above, because absent a world in which U.S. colleges hand out diplomas to everyone, which will never happen, the vast wealth gap will only get bigger. And that prediction does not even take into account the fact that the U.S. is now about 2 years overdue for a major recession, right? Every 7 or 8 years. Remember that? Oh, yeah, we are. We are, aren't we? Yeah, next year will be 10 years. Oh, what? And all the numbers that I show you, data, it's telling us we're here. It's here now. That's what the numbers are telling us. So, take care.